We humans have always carried a strange reverence for the complex. We admire the intricacies of quantum physics, the enigmatic depth of classical literature, and the layered ambiguity of surrealist art. Complexity makes us feel intelligent. It makes us feel like we're participating in something significant, something that can't be easily reduced. But our admiration for complexity doesn't stop at academia or the arts. It seeps into our emotional lives. And nowhere is this more obvious, more painful, or more persistent than in the domain of love. You'd think love would be the one area where simplicity would reign. After all, at its core, love is about mutual affection, shared values, emotional safety. But instead, we often find ourselves drawn to situations that feel like emotional puzzles. We get entangled in relationships that demand interpretation, decoding, and constant emotional vigilance. We don't just fall in love. We investigate, analyze, and interrogate every interaction, searching for meaning in what should feel naturally affirming. Maybe this sounds familiar. Maybe you've been, or are currently in, a situation where love feels like a riddle, where your emotional world revolves around trying to understand what your partner is thinking, what they meant, and where you stand. Perhaps you've told yourself, it's complicated, more times than you care to admit. And yet you stay, because leaving would feel like giving up on something that just hasn't been solved yet. Let's take a closer look at the forms this complexity often takes. There's the partner who says they want to commit, but not right now. They have reasons, of course. Work is overwhelming. They're still healing. They're not ready. They say they love you, but need space. And every time you try to pin things down, they ask for more patience. You rationalize. You tell yourself, they just need time. But days become weeks. Weeks become months. And somehow you're still waiting for them to be ready for something they claimed to want in the first place. Then there's the partner who's hard to read. Conversations often veer into confusion. You find yourself spending hours analyzing a single message. What did they mean by that emoji? Why did they say it that way? Did I offend them? Every word feels loaded. Every silence feels threatening. You start questioning your ability to communicate at all. And yet you try harder, rewriting texts, softening your tone, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering yet another misunderstanding. Or maybe you're with someone who appears devoted in theory, but is chronically unavailable in practice. They say they adore you, but never respond on time. They're always swamped, always exhausted. You ask to meet up, and they cancel last minute. Again, you mention your needs, and they respond with guilt or defensiveness. So you retreat, minimize your expectations, and begin carrying the emotional labor of the relationship alone. And then there are the late-night spirals, the endless journaling, the thinking loops, the desperate attempts to piece together what's happening. You sit in bed at 1 hot a.m., sketching out timelines, reading through chat histories, trying to find the thread that will explain everything. You cry, you question your sanity, and then you wake up the next morning pretending like everything's fine. Because starting over seems harder than staying confused. You go to therapy, you talk to friends, you obsess over attachment theory, trauma patterns, and emotional availability. You start to feel like a full-time analyst of your own relationship. And even though this mental work leaves you exhausted, some part of you is convinced it's all necessary. That if you just figure it out, if you're patient enough, if you prove yourself worthy, then things will finally make sense. The love will click into place. But in all this effort, you begin to erode. You stop feeling like yourself. You second-guess your instincts. You become hyper-aware of your flaws. You wonder if you're too intense, too demanding, too emotional. You start to believe that maybe you're the problem. After all, they keep saying you're too much. Maybe if you were more laid back, more independent, less emotional, things would feel easier. And society doesn't help. You've been told over and over that relationships take work, that love is messy, that nobody's perfect. So you lower your standards, mistake chaos for passion, and cling to the belief that difficulty is just a feature of real love. You've absorbed the cultural script. If it's hard, it must be real. If it hurts, it must be deep. But what if that's not true? What if our cultural worship of complexity is keeping us stuck in relationships that are emotionally draining and fundamentally unfulfilling? What if we're mistaking inconsistency for depth, unpredictability for chemistry, and anxiety for love? We don't just love these people. We obsess over them. We give them the benefit of the doubt over and over again. We romanticize their confusion. We elevate their emotional distance into a puzzle we feel compelled to solve. It becomes our job to understand them, our responsibility to heal them, our duty to prove our worth. Why? Because complexity flatters our ego. It allows us to feel like emotional heroes. It makes us believe we're participating in something rare, something high stakes. It makes us feel chosen, even when we're being neglected. It gives our pain meaning. And so, we stay. But there's a high cost. Emotionally complicated relationships eat away at our self-trust. They exhaust our nervous systems. They disconnect us from joy. They keep us in a constant state of hypervigilance, scanning for clues, tracking signals, decoding behavior. We don't realize it, but we're slowly training ourselves to accept confusion as the price of connection. It's time to question that premise. What if healthy love is actually, wait for it, simple, not effortless, not without its challenges, but simple in its emotional structure, clear, direct, grounded. A partner who wants to be with you doesn't keep you guessing. They show up. They respond. They care about how you feel. They make you feel safe, not on trial. You don't have to over-explain your needs, manage their moods, or justify your boundaries. You don't have to earn their affection. It's freely offered, and you feel it not just in words, but in the tone of their voice, the consistency of their actions, the warmth in their presence. You sleep better. You laugh more. You feel calm. You don't question your worth every day. You don't need to be a detective. You get to be a person. And yes, maybe that kind of love doesn't set off fireworks every week. Maybe it doesn't leave you crying in the shower or writing 5-paragraph texts at midnight. Maybe it's a little quieter, a little more grounded, but maybe that's the point. Maybe we've confused emotional chaos with intensity because chaos is what we've known. Maybe the real work isn't in tolerating confusion, but in learning how to receive peace. So as we begin this exploration into complicated love, let this be our starting place. If you're exhausted, confused, and full of self-doubt, maybe it's not because you're too emotional. Maybe it's because you're trying to build connection where there's no clarity. Maybe it's not your fault for wanting something real. Maybe it's just time to stop chasing complexity and start seeking what's actually clear. Because the greatest love stories are not the ones we suffer through. They're the ones we can actually live. We've all heard it. Real love is messy. We've absorbed it from books, movies, songs, and late-night talks with friends. We've seen the passionate arguments, the grand reconciliations, the love that teeters on the edge of obsession, and we've called it deep. We've grown up believing that complexity equals intensity and confusion equals connection. But what if that belief has been leading us into emotional traps? What if we've been taught to chase confusion and call it chemistry? Let's pause and consider this. Why do so many of us stay in relationships that keep us anxious, guessing, or constantly decoding? Why do we feel more drawn to the partner who gives us just enough to stay, but never enough to feel secure, than to someone who is steady, kind, and clear? The answer is layered, but it begins with this. The human brain is wired to seek patterns, especially in chaos. And when a relationship feels uncertain, our mind gets activated. We search for signs. We replay conversations. We obsess over meaning. And the more unpredictable someone is, the more our brain lights up. Not because we're in love, but because we're in survival mode. That's not romance. That's anxiety. The psychology behind the chaos. Emotionally unpredictable partners trigger what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, a pattern where rewards are given inconsistently. Sometimes they reply right away. Sometimes they disappear. Sometimes they're warm and open. Sometimes they shut down without explanation. And that very inconsistency is what makes them so hard to walk away from. It mimics the dynamic of the slot machine. You never know when you'll win, but every once in a while, you do. So you keep playing, not because you're fulfilled, but because your nervous system is hooked on the hope of reward. This dynamic is powerful. It makes you feel like the relationship is special. It convinces you that if you just work hard enough, love enough, wait long enough, things will finally stabilize. But that hope becomes a trap, and the longer you stay, the more you mistake the emotional highs and lows for real depth. Culture makes it worse. Culture romanticizes this chaos. In movies and novels, we're sold the idea that love should be dramatic, that fighting means passion, that jealousy means devotion, that longing is a sign of true love. We're told that love should feel like a storm, that if it's calm, it must be boring. So we learn to mistrust peace. We associate safety with dullness, and we start to believe that relationships must be earned through struggle. But here's the truth. Struggle is not proof of love. Confusion is not proof of depth. Intensity is not proof of compatibility. Sometimes the chaos is just chaos. The stories we tell ourselves when we're caught in an emotionally unstable relationship, we often create stories to make it make sense. We say things like, they're just afraid of getting hurt. They had a rough childhood. They've never met someone like me. They're complicated, but that's what makes them interesting. And while some of these things may be true, what we're really doing is trying to protect our hope. Because if we admit the relationship is unhealthy, we also have to face what that means for us. That we may have invested time, love, and energy into something that will never change. That we may have to let go. And letting go feels like failure. So we cling to complexity because it gives us a reason to stay. The defense mechanism, called depth. Psychologically, this is known as rationalization. It's a defense mechanism. It helps us manage the pain of being in a relationship that doesn't meet our needs by rebranding it as something noble, elevated, or emotionally profound. But true emotional depth doesn't require chaos. It requires vulnerability. It requires presence. It requires two people who are willing to meet each other honestly, without games or ambiguity. Complexity isn't the same as depth, and peace isn't the same as shallowness. Sometimes the relationship that feels boring is actually the one where you can finally rest. How trauma rewrites our standards. For many of us, chaos feels familiar because it mirrors past wounds. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, inconsistent, or unpredictable, then relationships that mirror that pattern may feel oddly right. Not because they're healthy, but because they're familiar. Your nervous system learned to equate love with anxiety. So when someone offers you steady, secure affection, it doesn't feel safe. It feels foreign. And when someone makes you chase their love, it feels like home. This is how unhealed trauma distorts our compass. It makes us crave intensity over intimacy. It teaches us that emotional labor is the price we must pay to be loved, but it's not. Love doesn't have to be earned through suffering. Affection doesn't have to come through confusion. You don't have to sacrifice your peace to be worthy of connection. What real depth looks like. So what does emotional depth actually feel like? It feels like being seen without performing. It feels like being heard without having to scream. It feels like mutual curiosity, not constant interpretation. It feels like being able to speak your truth and be met with care. It feels like resting in someone's presence, not recovering from it. Real depth is not loud. It's not chaotic. It's not a never-ending cycle of questions, debates, or emotional whiplash. It's slow, steady, quietly powerful. And if that doesn't sound like the love you're used to, it's not because it doesn't exist. It's because you've been taught to chase something else, rewriting the narrative. It's time to tell ourselves a new story, a story where consistency is sexy, clarity is magnetic, respect is romantic, and peace is the prize, not the threat. Let's stop asking if love is exciting enough. Let's start asking if love is safe enough, kind enough, and calm enough to grow in. Let's stop glorifying the partner who keeps us guessing. Let's start valuing the one who helps us feel certain, because love shouldn't feel like a storm to survive. It should feel like a shelter to rest in. Your calm is not boring. One final reminder. If someone ever tells you that you're too stable, too emotional, or too much, what they're really saying is, I'm not ready for the kind of love that requires emotional maturity. That's not your fault. That's their limitation. Your desire for clarity isn't a flaw. Your need for consistency isn't excessive. Your hunger for peace isn't boring. It's healthy. It's human. And it's exactly what you deserve. There comes a moment in many confusing relationships when pain transforms into something else. Obsession with understanding. It's as if your heart has been bruised one too many times, and your mind steps in to take over. You stop simply feeling hurt, and instead, you become obsessed with decoding the puzzle that is your partner's behavior. You don't just experience the pain anymore. You try to make sense of it, trying to map it, categorize it, control it. You find yourself replaying every conversation in your head, dissecting every word, every pause, every shift in tone, like a detective searching for clues. Why did they say that? Why did they go silent after I sent that text? What did their tone really mean? Your brain becomes a spreadsheet of emotional data points, trying to find patterns and causes. Hours are lost in this mental labyrinth. You run through endless what-if scenarios. If only I'd phrased it differently. If I had said yes instead of no, maybe then they wouldn't have gotten upset. You become trapped in this loop of analysis, where each thought only leads to more questions, more uncertainties. And then you turn to the internet, your new confidant and oracle. You search for words and phrases like attachment theory, emotionally unavailable partner, fear of intimacy, avoidant behavior, narcissistic traits, codependency. You read articles, watch videos, join forums. You collect knowledge, hoping it will unlock the door to the mystery of your relationship. But here's the twist. You're no longer just dating someone. You've become their unofficial therapist, their analyst, their decoder. You dissect their actions, diagnose their wounds, and try to repair their fractures. Deep down, you believe one thing. If I can just figure them out, then maybe I can fix this. Analysis as a coping strategy. At its core, this obsessive analysis is a coping mechanism. It's how your mind tries to regain control when your heart feels helpless. When emotions are raw and confusing, logic seems like the only safe place to land. You tell yourself, if I understand their behavior, then I'll know how to respond. If I know their fears, I can be the one who heals them. If I decode this right, maybe they'll finally stay. But the painful truth is, emotional chaos doesn't follow logic. People who are inconsistent don't become consistent just because you understand why they behave that way. People who hurt you don't stop just because you've uncovered their childhood trauma or attachment wounds. And still, you keep searching, not because you're genuinely curious, but because you're scared. Scared that the truth is simpler, more painful, and much harder to accept. That they may not want to change. That this may not be love. That no amount of insight will transform a misaligned relationship into harmony. The mind can't fix what the heart fears. Our minds love puzzles. They love order and logic. They seek reasons and patterns to make sense of chaos. But love isn't a math problem to be solved. It's messy, unpredictable, and often illogical. Trying to intellectualize a relationship that leaves you feeling small, anxious, or unwanted won't heal the wounds it creates. Instead, it often deepens them. The more you analyze their behavior, the more you start justifying it. You tell yourself, they didn't mean to hurt me. They just have trauma. They're not distant. They're just scared of intimacy. They're not manipulative. They're just misunderstood. While empathy is a beautiful trait, it becomes dangerous when it excuses harmful behavior. Understanding doesn't mean accepting or tolerating pain. Just because someone has a reason for hurting you doesn't mean you have to stay. The loop of understanding. This is how the loop goes. They hurt you. You rationalize. You explain it away. You stay. And then, again and again, every time, you tell yourself it's the last time. You draw new boundaries. You make new promises to yourself. This is it. I deserve better. I won't let it happen again. But then they say something soft. They open up a crack. They show a glimpse of vulnerability. And suddenly, you're back to analyzing. Maybe this is progress. Maybe they're finally changing. Maybe I just need to be more patient. But relationships that require endless analysis rarely provide real intimacy. If you have to study someone just to feel safe with them, that's not connection. That's survival mode, when understanding becomes self-abandonment. The more you focus on understanding someone else, the more you lose sight of yourself. You stop asking, how do I feel? Instead you ask, how can I make this work? No matter how I feel. That's not love. That's self-abandonment disguised as loyalty. You're not growing together. You're twisting yourself to fit their shape. You're writing mental essays to justify your pain, ignoring your own needs. Sometimes, the smartest and bravest thing you can do isn't to learn more about them, but to leave. Why cling to analysis? We don't overanalyze because we're cold or detached. We do it because we're desperate for clarity. Clarity gives us a sense of safety. It gives meaning to our pain. But not all pain comes with a satisfying explanation. Some people are inconsistent, not because they're deep or complicated, but because they're not ready to love sustainably. Some pull you close and push you away, not because they're complex, but because they don't know how to stay. You can read all the books, attend all the workshops, dissect every word, but it won't change the emotional truth. If the relationship makes you feel worse, it's not working. Sometimes, understanding why is less important than simply recognizing what is happening. Control versus acceptance. Our need to understand is really a need for control. If we can name the problem, we think we can solve it. But love isn't a problem to be fixed. You can't heal someone who won't heal themselves. You can't love someone into readiness. You can't logic someone into showing up. At some point, you have to move from curiosity to clarity, from explaining them to choosing you. The power of saying, I don't need to know why. There's immense freedom in these words. I don't need to understand them in order to let go. You don't need a detailed psychological profile. You don't need permission from a therapist. You don't need their full story to know when your story begins again without them. You just need to trust the truth of your own feelings. Are you tired, anxious, constantly second-guessing, walking on eggshells, losing sleep, shrinking yourself? Then that's enough. That's your data. That's your answer. Let go of the textbook. You've done enough. You've studied enough. You've tried enough. Now it's time to close the emotional textbook and open the door. Leave the lab. Leave the loops. Step into your life. A relationship that's right for you won't need a decoder ring. It will speak your language. It will honor your time. It will feel like home. And the only thing you'll need to analyze is how good it feels to finally be at peace. As we reach the final segment of our exploration into the complexities of relationships, it is crucial to understand that complexity, while sometimes inevitable, should not become an endless maze that traps us. Complexity can be enticing. After all, many of us are drawn to what is challenging and enigmatic, mistaking difficulty for depth. But the rule of simplicity reminds us that, fundamentally, love at its healthiest is straightforward and nourishing. It is a source of strength, security, and peace, not confusion, anxiety, or exhaustion. Understanding. When complexity becomes a problem. While some challenges in relationships are natural and even necessary for growth, complexity that consistently causes emotional turmoil is a warning sign. When the confusion becomes chronic, when you spend more time questioning than connecting, the relationship has moved beyond healthy difficulty into unhealthy complexity. Ask yourself, are you more often anxious, unsure, or insecure around this person? Do you find yourself constantly guessing their moods or intentions? Does the relationship drain your energy rather than uplift you? These feelings are important indicators. Too often, we rationalize away these red flags. We tell ourselves that all relationships have ups and downs. We justify our partner's inconsistencies with their past trauma or current stresses. We wait patiently, believing that love will eventually smooth over the rough edges. But patience has limits. Patience is not a virtue if it costs you your mental and emotional well-being. If you're constantly waiting for your partner to show up, emotionally or physically, and they don't, that's not patience, that's neglect. And neglect can be subtle, but deeply damaging. The temptation to glorify complexity. Human beings have a tendency to romanticize difficult relationships. We sometimes wear our emotional struggles like badges of honor, believing that if love is easy, it isn't real or worthwhile. We may convince ourselves that the pain and confusion are signs of something rare and profound. This can lead to staying in situations far longer than we should, clinging to the hope that things will change if we only understand more or try harder. But love is not supposed to feel like a constant puzzle to solve. It is not meant to leave you feeling fragmented or diminished. Clarity as a foundation for healthy relationships. Clarity is a gift, a lens through which you can see your relationship for what it truly is beyond hopes and fears. It is the ability to distinguish between the person you want someone to be and who they actually are. It helps you identify whether your needs are being met and whether you are being respected and valued. This clarity emerges not from overthinking or obsessive analysis, but from tuning into your own experience. How do you feel most of the time? Do you feel secure? Do you feel loved in a way that feels consistent and genuine? When your answers lean toward no, it is time to seriously evaluate your relationship. Self-knowledge and boundaries. Self-knowledge is central to applying the rule of simplicity. It means knowing your worth, understanding your limits, and recognizing what you are willing and not willing to accept in a partnership. Boundaries are the practical expressions of self-knowledge. They are not walls to keep others out, but lines that protect your emotional space. Healthy boundaries create safety and respect. They ensure that you are not sacrificing your well-being to maintain a relationship. When boundaries are consistently ignored or disrespected, that is a clear signal that the relationship's complexity is no longer healthy. It is harmful. Steps toward embracing simplicity. Pause the overanalysis. Give yourself permission to stop dissecting every interaction. Sometimes the answer is not in understanding more, but in accepting what you already know deep down. Focus on your feelings. Your emotions are your compass. Anxiety, fear, and sadness are not just inconvenient feelings. They are messages that something needs attention. Communicate clearly. Share your needs and boundaries openly with your partner. If they respond with respect and effort, it is a positive sign. If they dismiss or ignore you, take that seriously. Seek support. Trusted friends, family, or therapists can provide perspective and encouragement. They can help you see when complexity is masking unhealthy patterns. Practice self-compassion. Recognize that struggling in love is a human experience. Be gentle with yourself as you navigate these emotions and decisions. Consider your options. Honestly, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from a relationship that is consistently painful and confusing. Letting go as an act of courage and self-love. Walking away from a complicated relationship is never easy. It involves confronting loss, disappointment, and sometimes even guilt. Society often glorifies staying through hardship as proof of loyalty or strength. But true strength lies in knowing when to hold on and when to let go. Letting go is not giving up. It is an act of courage and self-love. It is choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion. By letting go, you make room for new possibilities, new relationships that honor your worth and bring genuine joy. Reclaiming your life and peace. When you step out of the endless cycle of trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle, you reclaim your life. You free yourself from the exhausting burden of doubt and uncertainty. You begin to notice how peace feels in your body, the calmness that comes from not having to second guess or rationalize. You discover the simple joys of presence, laughter, and authentic connection. This is the essence of love as it was meant to be. Love is simple. Love is showing up. Love is being present. Love is clear communication and mutual respect. Love is feeling wanted, secure, and valued. If your relationship feels like a labyrinth of confusion, it might be time to find a new path. Follow the rule of simplicity. Trust your heart and know that peace, clarity, and true connection